John is the inaugural member of the world's first pre-med game show where I tell you their stats, their extracurriculars, and their personal statement, and you tell me if they are competitive. He graduated from UC Berkeley with a 3.96 GPA, a 514 MCAT, on a 1 gap year timeline. Because this is our first time, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. After speaking with thousands of pre-meds one-on-one in the last year alone, the number one question we get is, am I competitive? And the fear is real. I'm afraid when I see a 4.0 GPA, 520 MCAT pre-med reviewed on YouTube get rejected everywhere. I'm also confused when I see a 3.5 GPA, 500 MCAT pre-med get accepted to multiple schools. Part of this is that the question, am I competitive, is not a complete question. Am I competitive, but for what? You may be competitive for UCI, but not UCLA. VCU, but not UChicago. We need to know what your goals are to best know whether or not you're competitive. In this case, John wants to be competitive for high-tier MD schools in California. Think UCLA and UCSF. You can find John's entire application on our application database. It features real pre-meds who got into real medical schools like UCSF and UCSD. In fact, my own UCLA application is on there. And every time we review a new application, like Sam, who got into a full ride scholarship school, Kaiser, just this cycle, we add it to the database so that you have the most fresh, most compelling applications to learn from. More info in the description box below. John's application holds the answer to 5 key questions. Should you build your application with one central theme under one core subject? John does cardiology basic science research, does orthopedic clinical research, is the executive director for the Hepatitis B project, and is a clinic coordinator for a medical clinic serving the homeless. Frankly, he's all over the place. And is this confusing to admissions committees? Number 2, how do you guarantee that medical schools see your impact? John demonstrates impact in 2 very specific ways, horizontally and vertically. Number 3, do hours matter? John has logged 1,500 hours as a medical scribe and 1,200 hours as a cardiology research assistant. Did that help or did it hurt? Number 4, are hobbies relevant? John shared his hobbies for backpacking and intramural soccer. They're not totally relevant to medical school admissions, right? Should he have done that? And question number 5, are cliches bad? John shares in his personal statement of his dream to be a professional soccer player. That ended when he tore his ACL in high school. Haven't we heard this athlete to doctor story before? And of course, the ultimate question, is John competitive for his goal of a high-tier MD school in California? Think UCLA and UCSF. Chapter 1, stats. All right, so we start with this applicant's real stats. You have the science GPA, all other GPA, also known as the non-science GPA, and the total GPA. We have a graduate from UC Berkeley with a 3.96 science GPA, practically perfect. A 3.83 non-science GPA, a couple of freshman and sophomore, looks like maybe English courses that didn't go so well. And then a total GPA of 3.92. MCAT score-wise, we have a 514, which is a 91 percentile score. 130, fantastic, Chem Phys. 126 on CARS, which is a 72nd percentile. 130 and 128. Now, the more important question is, what does this mean? We can take a look at table A23, which tells us how many students had what statistics and how did they fare during the application cycle process. So you can see on the left here, we have stratification based on total GPA. So not science, not all other, but total GPA. And unfortunately, it's not as granular as I'd like. It's separated into these 0.2 bits. But as we know, 3.79 is probably different from 3.9, is probably different from 4.0. Whereas there's probably not too much difference between 2.2 and 2, for example. But anyway, he falls into this total GPA category here. And on the total MCAT scores, we had a 514. Notice that 514 is on the lower range, right? Remember that the MCAT has a confidence band. It could have been anywhere from 512 to 516. 514 is on the lower end of this range. So he's probably somewhere in between these two. And when we look at the data, it says that about 21,000 people had
his GPA and his MCAT score, and about 15,000 got into a single medical school. Not all California medical schools, not UCLA, not Harvard, not some other school, but a single medical school is what they are measuring here. And so his odds of getting into one single medical school is around 69 to 77.5%. I should say not odds, but rather the students who had similar stats, 69 to 77.5% of them got into a medical school. And so he can probably expect somewhere similar as well. But again, remember, those weren't his goals. His goals were to get into a high tier California MD school, which isn't reflected in this data, but you can see overall he's quite competitive to at least become a doctor.
To be clear, that's getting into a single MD program. One, not all MDs, and certainly not California MDs, which tend to be more competitive than other schools in the nation. Yes, by the numbers, he has great odds to become a doctor. But remember the goal. It is high-tier MD programs in California. That's different than just getting into one MD school.
So how can we get a little bit more information on whether or not he's competitive for the high-tier California MD schools? Well, we'd have to take a look at those specific schools' data, and we have it pulled up here for you. This is the internal PREMED Catalyst school list document, which we use to customize our school list to our students' specific goals. And here you can see a variety of information from the school name to the state. We're focusing again on California schools for this applicant. Their website URLs, their mission, their class size, and then here on this information that we're going to focus on are their stats. What are their 25th, 50th, and 75th percentiles for their MCATs and total GPAs? Again, as a reminder, we have a 3.92 total with a 514 MCAT, and we're going to try and see where that lands specifically in the California medical school admissions arena. And you can see for the majority of schools, 514 is actually smack median, right? 513, 514, this is 517, 517, and actually 514 are the 25th percentile scores. 511, so he's a touch above for something like Loma Linda, but for Stanford, he's below the 25th percentile. For UC Davis, he's in that 75th percentile range. 517, 514, smack middle, 509, where he's above the 75th percentile again, and 516, 516. So I'm just going to be very explicit here and say that this is kind of crazy, right? We have a 91st percentile score. That means that he performed better than 91% out of 100 pre-med students. And yet in California, for some of these very competitive schools, that top 9% score is in the 25th percentile. That means people who end up at that school, 3/4 of them, 3 out of 4 of them will have a better MCAT score than you, better than the top 9% score in the nation. Medical school admissions is extremely competitive, and I want to make that explicit, especially in states like California. Now we take a look at the total GPA. His 3.92 will do very well. I mean, it's pretty much near perfect. If we're looking down the line here, 3.92 is median at Stanford, where their 75th percentile is 3.97. Again, pretty insane. But for the most part, he's living in that above 75th percentile or just below 75th percentile with some of these schools with 3.94, 94, 97, and 96. So overall, based on stats, I changed the status of these schools to be targets or reach based on whether or not he was in the 25th percentile for either MCAT or for the GPA. That would make it a reach school for him. So some of our high tier schools like the Kaiser, that was a full tuition ride scholarship, the USCs, the Stanford, UCI, UCLA, UC San Diego, UCSF, their stats are a touch above his, which means that the rest of his application is going to have to make up for that slight deficit. For the other schools, they're in his target range. His stats more than satisfy their medians, if anything, exceeds their medians and broaches that 75th percentile score. He has a little bit of leeway in the rest of his application in case it's not as strong as his stats. But again, remember the goal. I will repeat that multiple times throughout this video. Remember the goal. High tier MD schools, the goal therefore will need to be to make up for his deficit in stats, specifically his deficit in the MCAT, specifically probably his deficit in CARS, with his extracurriculars, with his letters of recommendations, with his personal statement, with his secondaries and interviews. Those are the things that are going to need to cover for this lower CARS section and convince medical schools to give him that acceptance.
John's GPA is near perfect and meets or exceeds the 75th percentile for most, if not all, of these California medical schools. His MCAT, however, hovers in that 50th percentile range. In fact, it's a bit lower for the higher tiered California schools that he's looking at. We're grading his GPA at a 5 stars out of 5 and his MCAT at a 3.5 stars out of 5. Chapter 2, the work and activities.
All right, so first, I just want to show you how to get to John's application in case you want to have it while we review it in its entirety. Our application database is in the link in our description box below, and once you open that link up to get to our application database, and you can scroll down here, there's a helpful toggle on how to use this database in case you're confused, but I'll just show it to you right now. There's also a full playlist of YouTube videos where I review all of these applications. So currently you'll see that every single application also has the result. Ben was rejected this first year and then he was accepted to UCI the next year. Paul was accepted to VCU, but for the purposes of this video, John's outcome is a secret because we'll find out at the end. You can click on John's personal statement here, watch and read the entire thing. You can also just hit next page and it'll go down the line for his work and activity entries. So everything from his research intern to his liver cancer research to his Cambodia orphanage volunteer, all of which we'll talk about in this video. But in case you wanted to filter by any specific type of extracurricular, for example, you're struggling with clinical experiences and you're not sure what you want to kind of focus your time and attention on, you can click on by clinical experience and it'll filter all these applications just by clinical experiences. You can also just take a look and make this custom table, and then we can filter it just by the applicant. So in this case, I am just going to focus on the name of the applicant or the application, and this will be John's application. And once we filter it for that, all of these extracurriculars are just John's. So these are the 15 extracurriculars plus his personal statement, all tagged by what type of thing it is. Is it most meaningful? Is it a research experience? Is it a theme or community service? And this is how you use the application database to get to his application. So now that we're here, I want to focus on his most meaningful extracurriculars. These are the ones that are most memorable. These are the ones where you get more characters to expand upon. And he decided to choose his cardiology research assistant, his head medical scribe, and his executive director for the hepatitis B project as his 3 most meaningful. Now, one thing that I do want to highlight is that it's interesting that none of them really have any overlap, right? Cardiology research assistant, if we look through the rest of his extracurriculars, there's not a lot of any other things that are cardiology related. If we look at his head medical scribe, again, not really, it's kind of a standalone extracurricular. And then the executive hepatitis B project, there are a couple of things that overlap. There's team HBV here. Hepatitis B is related to liver cancer, so liver cancer research is here. So it looks like he has some other overlap at within liver and hepatitis, but not really so much for these two, and these two don't really overlap with the third one. It's just an observation. Most pre-med students usually will find that they're either well balanced in that they do a bunch of different things and they may not necessarily be related, or they may find that they are very clearly focused on one single thing. In this case, it's hepatitis B, where all their extracurriculars will be related, or many of them will be related to hepatitis B research, hepatitis B policy, hepatitis B clinical experiences, hepatitis B fundraising, and it makes it very clear who this person is. When I look at it from the outset, though, I'm not quite sure who this applicant, John, is quite yet. And so we'll have to dig in deeper than just kind of the titles. So we'll start here with the cardiology research assistant, double click this so we have this entry. So we'll focus on some of the highlights of this extracurricular together. Essentially, it's a researcher at UCSF, does cardiovascular research. So he works on endothelial heart regeneration after injury. He uses a CRISPR-Cas9 system to knock out certain sections of the zebrafish genome to see its effect on heart regeneration. He clones enhancer sequences into bacterial cells and prepares them for injection into the zebrafish for fluorescence. I learned to be responsible for my independent work. Okay, fine. So this experience is an intersection of my personal and academic life. Interesting. I have a personal connection to cardiovascular disease because both my uncle and my father were victims of stroke in the past 2 years. In addition, I had previously studied the power and revolutionary nature of CRISPR gene editing, so I'm excited to use this technology to further research cardiovascular disease. That's an interesting point. So I'm sure we'll find a working activity later that's related to CRISPR-Cas9, and because he has familiarity with CRISPR-Cas9, maybe in a different context, he can take that familiarity and now apply it into this completely different field of research, right? These are what I call kind of like horizontal skills, where something like public speaking is useful if you are a waiter at a restaurant, but it is also very useful if you are giving a keynote talk to academic colleagues, right? So some of these skills and some of these tools you can use in multiple domains, and that's actually a strategy. If you know you have a skill, for example, you know you can build an audience through social media because you've done it for Relay for Life, like the American Red Cross Relay for Life. You can take that skill and say like, hey, dance marathon, look at what I did for Relay for Life. I really appreciate your mission, and I want to do it for you too, dance marathon. And I'm gonna bring that skill set and apply it to your mission. And that's a great way to earn more extracurriculars and also earn more impact immediately because you are very clear on what you're bringing to the table. So I'm inspired by the motivation and drive he has for expanding cardiovascular research using medical expertise. It's kind of a nothing sentence, right? It doesn't really say too much. He takes the questions and mysteries from his daily clinical work, uses scientific research to answer those questions, pipetting, failed experiments. I'm grateful to be surrounded by cutting-edge research and brilliant innovators. Throughout this research experience, I'm learning the importance of innovation. It's kind of redundant. You kind of are starting to slow down with your focus because you're starting to read kind of similar sentences again and again. I really appreciated the personal connection to his uncle and his father. I wish we learned a little bit more about that and that experience for him and his family and what he's seeing as an overlap with the work he's doing in his lab. But otherwise, the rest of the paragraph is pretty abstract, pretty broad, generic. Multiple premeds can probably write the same thing, so I don't think it's helping him too much on that front. Now let's go ahead and transition to his second most meaningful experience, the head medical scribe. So here we have him serving 2 years, which is also talked about in the dates, so you don't necessarily need to add that there. But he's been a scribe for many years. He observes and records patients' encounters, which you probably could have told me if you wrote just head medical scribe. So no need to repeat those responsibilities. My time as a scribe has allowed me to gain mentorship from doctors, okay, and ask about anything from rare medical cases to difficulties of being a doctor, also okay. Dozens of doctors I worked with helped me attribute traits to the type of humble and compassionate doctor I want to be. I wish there was an example there so I knew exactly what he was referring to. And then I witnessed the realities and long hours that come with being a doctor, and I'm up for the challenge to sacrifice my time and energy to become one. Over time, I was promoted as the head medical scribe for the medical group. This obviously entailed more responsibilities, like recruiting and training new medical scribes. So it's interesting now that he's showing his ascension to leadership. As much as I love learning from doctors, I enjoy teaching the scribes how to properly assist a physician during a patient encounter and quizzing them on the countless medical terms we do need to memorize. So I think that's a great point, right? He finds satisfaction and joy in helping other scribes learn how to be the best helper in a medical clinic. You don't see that too often, where someone is more interested in throwing the pass that leads to the score as opposed to like scoring the ball themselves, right? Someone who finds joy in being the like number one right-hand man type of role. And I believe him when he says that. And it's a nice observation to add. I also developed a system to increase communication and efficacy of the medical group. I created an Excel document that allows scribes and doctors to communicate their schedules and determine the patients that need to be seen throughout the week. Okay, this is a great example of how he is really doing a good job in his leadership position. He's understanding the problem that these scribes and the doctors have, and he's implementing some solution. In addition, this sheet organizes the notes that are either unsigned or need to be entered into the EHR system. Great. Acted as a liaison for the physician board and the medical scribe, so he's kind of their spokesperson. Did my best to work out any issues or concerns. Again, I wish there were maybe a little bit more specific story there, because when you just say, it's my job is to work out the concerns, then the reader goes, okay, like what concerns? Can you tell me more? But obviously you can't tell me more because this is a written application you've already submitted. And so because you can't tell me more, it just leaves me with this question. Oh, I wish he would have told me more. So the strategy from the writing end is to know that that's the question they're going to ask and just answer it for them. This is why writing is a team sport. Someone else can tell you, hey, I have more questions on that. Can you just add more detail? And you can go ahead and add that detail. All in all, my time as a head medical scribe has strengthened my ability to communicate and lead with competence and professionalism. Okay, 2 characteristics. Okay, as a future doctor. All right, good. So head medical scribe, earn a leadership position here. So there's an element of humility overall. There's a portion of this and the last most meaningful extracurricular that were a little bit just wordy and unnecessary, but it's good to start to know how he's spending his time. We move on to the third one, which I think will likely be the most interesting one, his executive director for the Hepatitis B project. Okay, so the Hepatitis B project is student run. It provides free Hep B education, screenings, and vaccinations to the people of Blank County. A few of my closest family members have been battling hepatitis B and liver cancer their whole lives. I joined Hep B because I want to actively participate in fighting against this disease. This already feels like a little bit more emotional and raw, and I really appreciate just how charged it is and how personal it seems. As a volunteer, I became passionate about serving this community because it reminded me of my own family back home. I learned to be culturally competent because we often work with people from various cultures like Mongolia or Tibet. Another example of a place where a story would have helped. What is different about someone from Mongolia, or what is different about someone from Tibet? Because personally, I've never cared for a Tibetan patient. My time as executive director contributed to my development as a leader, ignited my passion for serving. There's a couple of responsibilities: implement new ideas, lead the board, organize clinics, okay. And the most memorable project. See, when I read phrases like that, I immediately start to listen. My ears perk up and I go, oh, okay, I'm interested in this. The most memorable project, ... Here we go. I remember during my term was when I spearheaded organizing a massive flu clinic for the underserved in Oakland. That's awesome, right? I knew that this task I could not fulfill on my own. Okay, so I learned to effectively delegate responsibilities and work with my team, board members, county health department, found locations. He's describing the project, trained club members. Although challenging and time consuming, it was most rewarding. In the end, we managed to administer over 300 free flu shots to the underserved populations in Oakland. It's awesome, right? And you're getting a big picture perspective on what it took. Training the people, finding the locations, working with the county health department, getting the flu shots, all this stuff. I found joy not only in personally administering flu shots, that's awesome, and helping the community, but also in seeing the joy on the faces of my peers. It's the teamwork and culture that made this experience much more rewarding, in addition to serving my community through giving free flu shots. It's kind of interesting because we started with hepatitis B and his family dealing with liver cancer. But we ended with this very nice project that the club led for their community. And it's adjacent to hepatitis B, right? The Asian Pacific Islander community has a higher prevalence of hepatitis B, but they also are low socioeconomic status. They're also low health literacy. And for these populations, vaccinations are a huge deal. And so it's great to see that this was the project that they focused on for the year and that he executed it fantastically. So then now the big question here is, should he have focused on more of his hepatitis B work? Clearly there's a keynote. Clearly there is the liver cancer research. So there's some overlap between multiple extracurriculars, but he focuses instead on cardiology, head medical scribe, one extracurricular on the hepatitis B project, and the remaining are kind of really spread out between homelessness and orthopedics and CRISPR-Cas9 and orphanages and biology student instructor. There's a lot of different things that don't necessarily build on the same thematic central theme or subject. Let's see if that was a mistake.
Question number 1. Should you build your application with one central theme under one core subject? So now that you've seen John's extracurriculars, should he have just focused on being a cardiology expert? Perhaps instead of spending time as the executive director for the hepatitis B project, should he have been the executive director for a club like Saving Hearts, which looks at detecting arrhythmias in youth athlete populations? Instead of being an orthopedic surgery clinical researcher, should he have done that with a cardiologist? The answer is likely no, and there are two key reasons. Reason number one, you become one-dimensional. Just doing cardiology alone pigeonholes you. As a reminder, you're pre-med. You're nowhere near cardiology residency. There's 4 years of medical school left, 3 years of an internal medicine residency, and then you can think about cardiology fellowship. And so often it can feel closed-minded to just limit yourself to one specialty, one subject area. My father used to say that when you're 40, you can mow the lawn. Until you're 40, don't worry about mowing the lawn. And the same goes here. If you're pre-med, don't worry about choosing a specialty. You can choose that far later down the road. And to be explicit, choosing it early may make you come across as closed-minded. Reason number two, you're missing the point. Admissions committee members are looking for people to admit into medical school, not admit into one specific specialty. These AdComs are not looking for neurology residents or cardiology fellows. What they are searching for is evidence of something more abstract. They're searching for excellence. And that's because the number one predictor of a medical student who is impactful is a pre-med who has already been impactful. So if John is excellent in cardiology basic science research, he's excellent as the executive director of the hepatitis B project, he's excellent as an orthopedic surgery clinical researcher. And not only do his extracurriculars and his resume show that, but his letters of recommendation substantiate that, chances are that whatever he commits to in medical school, he will also be excellent at. And above all else, you want that person representing your medical school. Answer, you likely should not just focus on one central theme under one core subject. Focus first on impact, and the rest will follow. That mindset shift is the number one mistake that pre-meds make on their written application. Instead of focusing on reflection and impact through stories and data, pre-meds just regurgitate a boring snooze fest of a resume. If you also do that on your application, I guarantee that you'll completely bore your AdCom to death. You'll become forgettable. We take highlighting impact so seriously that with every student we support on their application cycle, nothing gets submitted unless it's reviewed by a primary editor and then by a second pair of eyes, me. We have multiple checklists to ensure that you don't make the same mistakes as tens of thousands of pre-meds did in the decade of applications past. And when you don't make mistakes, you become like Sam, who earned a full ride $400,000 scholarship to Kaiser, or Josh, who is interviewing at Mayo, WashU, and Cornell. If you're finding this helpful, consider working with us during your application cycle. More info in the description box below. Question number two, how do you guarantee that medicals see your impact? John demonstrates impact in two very specific ways, horizontally and vertically.
So now we'll talk about the two ways to demonstrate impact. There's horizontal impact or perspective, and then vertical impact or depth. I went ahead and took a look at all these extracurriculars and bucketed them so that you could see that there are different ways that he's getting perspective and different ways that he's getting impact through depth. Perspective or horizontal scale, I bucketed into three different categories. And then secondly, here on the vertical scale component, you'll see that there are different examples of depth. So 1A, we'll read this in his personal statement, but I'll spoil it for you a little bit. He tore his ACL in high school, and part of his orthopedic research, which you can see here, orthopedic surgery clinical research, takes a look at ACL type repairs. And so he's getting the perspective from someone who tore it personally, and he's getting the perspective from someone who researches other people who have also had a similar injury. That is an example of horizontal impact or perspective. On 1B here, we have a couple of different extracurriculars. He gave a keynote about HPV. He also does basic science research in liver research right here, liver cancer research. And then he is the executive director for the hepatitis B project, which is more of a community health, public health extracurricular. And so you can see again here, as an HPV keynoter, he's taking the role of like an academia, a kind of professor giving a talk. As a basic science researcher, he's in a lab behind a bench, pipetting and looking at results. And then as the executive director from the hepatitis B project, he is leading an organization, hosting a big flu event in Oakland, Chinatown. He's doing more public health type work. So we have public health, we have basic science, and we have academia, that type of like professor role. Those three different perspectives on the same subject, hepatitis B. And then lastly, 1C here, we have a extracurricular where he was a CRISPR-Cas9 research intern at UCSF. And then he was also a cardiology research assistant at UCSF, which focused on CRISPR-Cas9 in the zebrafish genome. So he learned CRISPR-Cas9 first on this research intern, maybe in some summer. He took those skills and applied that to a different perspective. In this case, the perspective of a cardiovascular lab. That is another example of seeing the same technology in a different light. Now, number 2 here, when we talk about vertical scale, it's really how high can you move up the ladder, right? So for example, in the scribe position that he writes about, he starts as a just regular scribe. And then after being there for a couple of years, he's promoted to the head scribe, where he's now responsible for training other scribes. That's very simple, one step up the ladder, right? This second example, he starts as a volunteer at a medical clinic. We have it right here, clinical volunteer for the medical clinic. He volunteers after a summer year, local medical clinic. He starts as a shadow, where he's shadowing medical assistants and nurses. He's conducting urine tests and taking vitals. And then eventually he's promoted to have the responsibility of facilitating the women's diabetes group sessions. He's creating the environment where everyone's feeling comfortable. He's talking through women and how they're managing their sugar levels. But that only starts after he starts as a shadow and he volunteers his time to do the vitals, and he's running some of the lab tests, and he's moving his way up. That is vertical impact or depth. Another example is through the City Team Medical Clinic, and you can see that experience here. And again, he starts freshman year as a volunteer. It's an organization that serves the homeless population in San Francisco. And you'll read here that he initially serves as a triage volunteer, where he's assessing those who required medical assistance, he's providing medications, he's shadowing. And then last year, after serving as the volunteer for multiple years now, he is the clinic coordinator. He assigns and organizes triage volunteers and providers to patients who have yet to be seen that day. So you see this very natural progression over time. And that only happens, again, with time, with giving yourself truly to that extracurricular, with growing and learning skills. That is how you build on that vertical impact or depth. And one of my favorite points that I like to make at this stage is that if you don't feel like you are earning the leadership positions that maybe you feel like you deserve or that you need on your application, I want to remind everyone that there's a possibility that maybe you're just not good enough for that position yet. And to be clear, that's okay. I wasn't good enough for many leader positions early on in my pre-med career. And over time, I put more time into it, I learned more skills, and I truly earned those positions. And I write here that one doesn't accidentally make an impact. You don't suddenly wake up and accidentally fall into a leadership president position, right? If you don't feel like you're good at leading, or if you don't feel like you're earning the opportunities, just maybe you're not good at leading, and maybe you don't have the skill set that would be required to lead a team quite yet. And that's okay. Give yourself permission and give yourself the time to continue to commit to that extracurricular and continue to support their mission. And you'll see that in this application from John, he is a church leader. He's a head scribe. He's the executive director for hepatitis B. He facilitates the women's diabetes meetings. He's a clinic coordinator for City Team. He was a team captain for his soccer team in high school. His experience as a leader is undeniable. But if you take 2 or 3 steps back, he was the freshman that probably didn't get any minutes on his soccer team. He volunteered at the medical clinic in City Team for 5 years before coming up to that clinic coordinator position. He started as a shadow for medical assistants here in this diabetes facilitator position. He was just a normal hire where other head scribes were training him. He was a volunteer for the hepatitis B project, where he was handing out flyers, and he was the one doing the rote tasks that no one wanted to do because he's the volunteer that just started. And of course, he's been going to church since he was a kid, right? These things don't happen just within a month or even a quarter or a semester. They happen over months to years of commitment and growth. And I think that John's application here does a great job of showing you that he took individual steps to get to his leadership position. He did not just rocket there and ascend straight there. And so maybe when you think about whether or not you deserve a leadership position, remind yourself, do you have the skills? Have you shown that commitment? Are you the right person for that job? And if you're not, that's okay. It doesn't say anything about you. It says that you need a little bit more to get to that place where you are deserving of that position. I find that empowering because it puts the ball in my court and helps me figure out what I can do better to serve the organization's needs. And if you do best, if you do that best, if you support the organization's mission better than anyone else, naturally the organization will look to you to lead them through the next project. And here in this timeline, we're going to do this very beautiful summation of both horizontal and vertical impact, really through this hepatitis B theme. So you can see again on the x-axis is different perspectives. Not only was John a keynote hepatitis B conference speaker, he's also the hepatitis B project executive director and a basic science hepatitis B researcher. That is horizontal perspective. He's getting different lenses on the same subject. In addition to that, we layer on vertical impact, and you can just focus on the hepatitis B project. He started as a volunteer where he just joined the club, was going to the Panda Express fundraisers, was going to the one clinic every other month and just doing his best. And then over time, he ascended to be a committee leader. Maybe he was in charge of health brochures, or maybe he was in charge of publicity and one social media post a month, something like that. And then over time, he did a good job with that. And that depth led to his being the executive director of the hepatitis B project, eventually piloting the massive flu clinic that they delivered in Oakland, Chinatown. So you can see when we layer horizontal and vertical impact, we see both that perspective and the growth and the skill development that is required to get to these big leadership positions that are impactful, that do stand out.
Impact can often be this amorphous, confusing thing. But now we've defined it as having two components, a horizontal component and a vertical component. Horizontal is perspective. How many different ways can you attack the exact same problem? John studies hepatitis B, basic science, looking at the actual virus in a lab. He's also the executive director of the hepatitis B project, getting a sense of what patients in the community experience with this diagnosis. And lastly, he gives academic keynote talks at conferences focused on hepatitis B. Here, his audience is other students, researchers, and academics also interested in hepatitis B. These three extracurriculars give him horizontal impact or perspective. Now, vertical impact is depth. You can start by working in a lab. That's level 1. Then you might present a poster. That's level 2. Then you might submit an abstract. Level 3, submit a paper. 4, be a first author in a paper. 5, be the first author of a paper published in a high impact journal. 6, these different levels, that is vertical impact or depth. So the answer, guarantee medical schools see your impact through combining and mixing and matching horizontal with vertical impact. Widen your perspective and deepen your work. Question number 3, do hours matter? John has logged 1,500 hours as a medical scribe, 1,200 hours as a cardiology research assistant, 250 hours shadowing. Did that help or did it hurt?
So one thing I do want to focus on for this application is the number of hours that John puts into each of these extracurriculars. If you look at this cardiology research assistant, it's 1,200 hours. If you look at this head medical scribe, it's 1,500 hours. And even if you look at something like shadowing, he has 7 physicians here with a total of 250 hours. That's certainly more than the majority of premeds that I see. And remember, the key question that you want to answer is, if I put an additional hour into this extracurricular, can I increase my impact, either my horizontal impact or my vertical impact? Can I increase it significantly? So if you go down the line, if you put more hours into your cardiology research assistant position, can you increase your, in this case, vertical impact significantly? What that would probably mean is If I put in another 200, 300 hours, is a high impact paper coming out? Do I have a poster or conference or an abstract lined up that I can kind of finish out this project and really present? Those would be things that would be worthwhile to invest that extra investment of hours. But if we go down, we go to the head medical scribe. Let's say we've been the head medical scribe for 300 out of the 1,500 hours here. Yeah, maybe if I put another hour in, I could do another project that was a quality improvement project for the clinic. Maybe, but I've already done this Excel document. I'm already the liaison between the scribes and the doctors. Here is an example where I would say there are diminishing returns. The more hours I put in, I probably can't change the amount of impact. If I put this to 2,000 or 3,000 hours, is there going to be a big difference on what I write here? Probably not. When you're scribing in a medical clinic, you see very similar cases come in again and again, and that work is repetitive, and that work is not going to increase your impact meaningfully. So for something like this, once you hit that 1,500 hours, once you've been the head medical scribe and you made a real change and difference in that role after 300, 500 hours, chances are it's probably not that helpful to add another 1,000 or 2,000. Next, we have physician shadowing here, 7 physicians in different specialties. We have a hospitalist, a palliative care, ortho surgeon, EP, cardiologist, private practice doctors. There's a ton of different perspectives. That's that horizontal scale again. But again, at what point do you kind of exhaust that marginal improvement? I think 7 shadowing with 200 hours, 250 hours is more than enough. I personally would not bring that to that 500 or 750 or 1,000 hours of shadowing. It's just far too much.
Remember, everything starts and ends with impact. And here we're gonna throw back to a concept from microeconomics, marginal utility. It's the additional benefit that you get from consuming one more unit of a good or service. Basically, it's how much joy would I get from eating one more chip or doing one more hour. And you can apply this concept to the hours you invest in your extracurriculars. If I spend one more hour in this extracurricular, will it meaningfully increase my impact? And most importantly, where do I get the most impact per hour spent? John clearly decided that he was damn good at his cardiology research. And of all the places he could spend time, spending more hours there gave him the most impact. Efficiently allocating your hours turns you into that pre-med who is unbelievably competitive and still has a ton of time to enjoy their college years. Yes, you can have your cake and you can eat it too. And no, that doesn't make you try hard or insufferable. It just makes you strategic about how you spend your time and what you prioritize in your life. And so don't let other pre-meds gaslight you into thinking that there's only one or the other. You can have both. Answer, hours matter. For the most part, you need to put in hours to have impact. But at some point, you need to figure out where you're getting the most bang for your buck. Once you find where your hours get you the most mileage, spend most of your time there. Drive home that gold mine. Number 4, are hobbies relevant? John shared his hobbies for backpacking and intramural soccer. Should he have done that?
This is personally one of my favorite hobbies that I've ever reviewed on this channel, and we'll read it together. Soccer has always been a huge part of my life. This remained true in college since I gathered a group of friends to play intramural soccer. A few of them had no prior experience, and I had a blast teaching them and seeing them grow throughout the 6 semesters we played together. So first and foremost, 6 semesters is a long time. That's 2 or 3 years where you're really playing with the same team. And I just there's this nostalgia there where you're kind of with your friends in college and you're growing together and you're getting better at something. You're seeing yourself come into being an adult. I think that was captured very well in that sentence. I had a blast teaching them. Also reminds us of when he is the head medical scribe teaching other scribes how to be the best assistants to doctors possible. You're starting to see again that humility, that recognition that it's not about him, that he wants to put other people first. And that motif is repeated here and is nice to see again. Games were also an excellent outlet of stress in academics. So that's the soccer part. This is my favorite backpacking part. Since I was young, I've been backpacking all around the world. I love learning about the different cultures and traditions I have not experienced. Before matriculating in medical school, my goal is to build a one-way ticket to Portugal and backpack my way across Europe and Asia until I reach Cambodia. I don't know how long that would take. I don't know if that's like an insane backpacking trip or a normal backpacking trip. But I think there's just something so freeing and genuine and authentic about these like 3 sentences that it makes it very clear that this person is his own person. He and his hobbies are so unique and personal to him that I just really appreciate it, right? He doesn't make the hobby about medicine. It's not how backpacking shows him different cultures so he can speak different languages and connect with his Tibetan patient. No, it's nothing like that. It's just, I want to buy a ticket to Portugal and I want to backpack my way across until I reach Cambodia. And there's just a really awesome simplicity and beauty about that.
We love reading about your hobbies. Soccer and backpacking isn't exciting to John, and it feels normal to him, but that's because he's been doing it for literally decades. But remember, your opinion isn't what matters. The AdCom's opinion does. And after they've read 1,000+ experiences about scribing, I promise you they're very excited to read about someone's backpacking across Portugal, across Asia. Hobbies add color to your work and activities. Who you are outside of medicine is equally important as who you are within. Your extra clinical interests make you a better doctor. More importantly, they make you a better person. Answer: hobbies are completely relevant. Now, don't add one just to add one, but don't hide from them if they make you uniquely you. And now, let's grade his work and activities. Clinical experience. He's a head medical scribe, a medical practice care coordinator, and he did some shadowing. Overall, I'm giving this 4 stars. It's a bit generic, but he's earned multiple leadership opportunities within each of the practices he's worked with. That's a good sign that the doctors and his staff trust him with real responsibility. Second category, research. He did cardiovascular research at UCSF, he did clinical research with the orthopedic surgery department, and did hepatitis B liver cancer research. For me, this is 4.5 stars. Great breadth and great depth, both horizontal and vertical impact. He's not quite at that 5-star level of wow. Something like a publication in a high-impact journal would have taken him there. Community service. He's the executive director for the Hepatitis B Project. He's a volunteer caseworker for the homeless clinic, and he volunteers at a Cambodia orphanage. I'm giving this 4 stars. It's great breadth, but only good depth. He's not quite at that 5-star level, which would feature more posters, abstracts, and perhaps publications in high-impact journals. Leadership. He's the head medical scribe. He's the executive director at the Hepatitis B Project. He's a clinic coordinator at the medical practice. He delivered a keynote talk at the Team HBV conference. And he's the president of a certain medical association. For me, this is 5 stars. He's earned multiple high-impact leadership positions in clinical, community service, student organization, academic, or research context, you name it, he's a leader there. This is the guy leading the charge. Overall, this is an extremely strong extracurricular profile. We grade it at 4.5 stars. Do you agree? What do you think? Chapter 3, personal statement.
And now we get to the personal statement, my favorite part of every application. So let's digest kind of some of the more key points here. You can always pause and read the entire thing yourself, or you can always head to the Notion database and see the exact thing that's not annotated by myself. So my dream was to become a professional soccer player. I scrutinized and mastered my favorite players' signature moves, the angle of their shots. I often trained alone until the field lights turned off, hours after my teammates went home. Naturally, when my club soccer coach appointed me as a team captain, my 10-year-old self was elated and proud. I naively flaunted the captain band around my arm, trying to lead with the loudest voice and the most talent. However, over the years, I learned that leading a team requires greater responsibility and attentiveness to each teammate's talents and contributions. I really like the juxtaposition because he started to really sound like this braggadocious, not very humble guy, which is what he's going for. And then he flipped the script and said, yeah, you know, I was 10 years old and I realized that leadership is actually different. When I tore my ACL in high school, I was hopeless and heartbroken. The pain of jeopardizing my soccer career was equal, if not greater than the physical pain in my knee. There's an interesting comment there about the mental side of sports and the physical side of sports. However, I remember my orthopedic surgeon taking the time and care to walk me through the treatment process step by step. As we looked at the MRI and monitored the stages of my recovery, I was intrigued by the restorative power of the body. It showed me the anatomy of my torn ACL and explained the mechanisms that my body used to heal itself. During my year-long treatment, I was always eager to meet my doctor to learn about the progress of my knee and how to properly rehab it. In the months of reflection during my recovery, my ego-fueled pursuit of becoming a soccer player was challenged by my insight into our fragility and necessity for medicine. So it's kind of an interesting transition, right? We have a person who tears his ACL, has a really strong relationship with his orthopedic surgeon. And I like how simple these sentences are. He showed me the anatomy during the long year treatment. I was always eager to meet him. I wanted to learn how my body was recovering. I wanted to see how my knee was progressing. It really seemed like a positive role model that he had. And remember, his knee is everything to him. He wanted to be a professional soccer player. This transition, though, is a little odd for me, where he has this ego-fueled pursuit of becoming a soccer player, and that was challenged by how necessary medicine was maybe for his knee. I'm not quite sure I understand that concept. Throughout college, the passion and devotion I once had for soccer shifted towards an interest in medicine. I wanted to participate in caring for the underserved, so I joined City Team Medical Clinic. There, I worked with multiple physicians as they provided healthcare to the homeless in San Francisco. I became close to Carol. Finally, a story that we can really latch our teeth into here. A homeless woman who regularly came to our clinic. She walked in each time with a fresh and gaping wound on her arm. However, the physician and I had trouble diagnosing the problem because she would not tell us the cause of the injury. Interesting. Nevertheless, the provider taught me how to treat the wounds, and I tended to her each time. After building a friendship with Carol, she opened up to me and shared that she inflicted the wounds on herself just to be seen and treated by a doctor. I soon realized she simply yearned the love and care that she did not receive on the streets. As Carol's tears dripped onto my shoulders, I realized that the homeless people I was serving deserved just as much love and care as any of us. If anything, they need extra care and extra attention due to their circumstances. Through Carol and serving the homeless, I learned that a physician has the duty and opportunity to not only heal physically, but also to heal emotionally. Okay, so this is a pretty chronological personal statement in style, which just means kind of like, how did you start to make your way to becoming a doctor? And it starts with a soccer player who tore his ACL and then wants to be a little bit more interested in medicine. It's kind of a big jump between that second and third paragraphs here. But then we're starting to really get to see real experiences that made a mark on his understanding of medicine. And it starts with this Carol patient. So one thing I do love about this is the level of detail, right? Physician and I had trouble diagnosing the problem because she would not tell us how she got injured. Every single time there's a fresh and gaping wound, and no matter what, they treated her first and asked questions after. This conclusion, I think, is very powerful, that she just yearned for love and care that she didn't receive on the streets. Like, there is a beauty about someone just caring for you no matter what. And it seems like Carol was getting that at the healthcare clinic. And she starts crying. Homeless people I was serving deserve as much love and care as any of us. If anything, they needed extra care. And I think the story goes that she was... John is one of my colleagues, and I think the story goes something like Carol was like harming herself just so that she could be taken care of within the clinic, because the care outside of the clinic was just so different in her life. And again, that type of story is just very powerful to understand and recognize what people will do just to feel loved and cared for. And I wrote here that these details are only privy to those people who are actually engaged in the activities. So after volunteering at City Team, I hungered to learn even more about medicine, so I applied to be a medical scribe. So again, very chronological. I did this, then this, then this, then this. After observing doctors on the hospital floor, I saw how gracefully each physician juggled problems, directed the nurses and the residents, made important decisions. They led medical teams, used strengths. I noticed that physicians led in a way in which each member of the medical team had a voice and felt like a contributor. And then he jumps to being a scribe, so it's a little bit of jumping here. As a scribe, I saw the parallel between the leadership of a physician and that of a soccer team captain. So this is a big teamwork type paragraph, right? Moreover, I recognize that leadership had deeper meaning, as its purpose is not to win matches in soccer and gain personal satisfaction, but to heal the sick and make a lasting impact on the community. Beyond leadership, I admire that physicians are always mentoring, always learning, especially in academia. I observe doctors send labs to one another, collaborate on innovative techniques, and discuss rare cases as part of their work. Working as a scribe for 2 years, I witnessed how the role of physician extends beyond treating the patient, but also working harmoniously with colleagues. Okay, so this entire paragraph is all about teamwork, right? How he's seeing his physician role models, how he's seeing his lab PI role models work with each other. As a scribe, as a team captain, he's really building all these connections that medicine is a team sport, which again, feels like the rest of his writing, right? Remember when he was the head medical scribe, or remember when he was playing intramural soccer with his friends. This is a guy who recognizes the excellence of others. Through my treatment process is what initially attracted me to becoming a doctor. My time at City Team and this hospital cemented my desire to pursue it as a career. These experiences demonstrated how medicine was the perfect culmination of my 3 biggest passions: learning, serving, collaborating. I'm looking forward to learn consistently as a physician scientist. Additionally, I wish to continue to work with the underserved population to physically and emotionally heal patients like Carol. Okay, finally, I strive not to be that flaunting captain that I once was for my soccer team, but to be a physician leader that emphasizes teamwork and humility. As my dream has changed from becoming a professional soccer player to a doctor, I aim to relentlessly train to become a physician leader that can make an impact on patients and a community as a whole. Okay, great. So really it's about him understanding and growing to learn what proper leadership or proper team work looks like, and how the vehicles of soccer led him to medicine, and how these real experiences with Carol and in the lab and as a scribe guided him to being a doctor. Is it the strongest personal statement I've ever read? Certainly not. I think it makes sense. It's straightforward. The strength of his extracurriculars above, I think, is really what carried this personal statement. Because if the experience with Carol felt kind of like not genuine, not engaging, then that would have made the personal statement also weaker. If he wasn't the head scribe and very involved over 1,500 hours training other scribes, and was building Excel sheets for the clinic and being the liaison, then yeah, these sentences really wouldn't pack any punch. So it is the strength of his resume first and foremost that carries the writing. A lot of people get it backwards. They want their writing to carry their weak extracurriculars, but that's very hard to do. The classic phrase is you can't turn chicken shit into chicken salad. And if you have chicken salad, it's very hard to turn into chicken shit. In fact, it's impossible. He has a chicken salad of a resume. Strong scribe, strong research, strong executive director of hepatitis B, which I personally would have loved to hear a little bit more about in a personal statement because it seems central to his application. But those things are chicken salad. And no matter how he writes it well, good, but not great, not perfect. He can't turn that strong resume into weaker writing. He can't turn that chicken salad into chicken shit. And so overall, this chronological personal statement has a couple of cliches. The athlete that tears his ACL and then wants to become an orthopedic surgeon right after, like that cliche or that type of storyline we've seen before. So the question is, was this personal statement the right move? Let's find out.
Question number 5, are cliches bad? Cliches in and of themselves are not bad. In fact, it's just a word that means a common phrase. And really, they're common for a reason. We all have shared lived experiences as fellow humans, as fellow premeds. And if anything, those shared experiences bring us all together. With that being said, cliches, just like every other statement, must be backed up. It's uncommon and therefore not cliche to say that you want to be a doctor because there's this stigma around end-of-life care that you want to completely change. But if your application is anything like John's, that application has nothing to do with end-of-life care. And so even though you opened with an uncommon, non-cliche statement, your application is discordant and doesn't make sense and is therefore terrible. Now on the flip side, it's very common and very cliche to say that you want to become a doctor to help underserved communities. And now if your application is anything like mine, again, you can see my whole application on the application database in the link in the description box below, then that cliche statement that I want to be a doctor to help underserved communities is backed up by my lived experiences. And that concordance gets me into medical school, even if I opened with a cliche statement. And so to grade his personal statement, we are giving it 3 stars. This is a standard personal statement that wasn't completely clear. The motivation for becoming a doctor comes from the ego and angst of wanting to be a professional soccer player. And there's not great concordance or synergy between that story and the rest of his extracurriculars. It's unclear, for example, how soccer relates to his interests in hepatitis B or cardiovascular research, possibly the orthopedic clinical research that he did, but nothing really else. Chapter 4, are they competitive?
All right, we've made it to the end of John's application, and you can see the last bit of information from this app is the number of schools he applied to. And I've counted them already for you, but it's 32 total schools from Albert Einstein all the way down to Weill Cornell. So pretty top heavy list. You got the Harvards and the other top 20 schools in there. But this 32 school list, let's see how he does.
GPA, 5 stars. MCAT, 3.5 stars. Clinical experience, 4 stars. Research, 4 stars. Community service, 4 stars. Leadership, 5 stars, with a total grade for his extracurriculars being 4.5 stars, and a personal statement of 3 stars. Now, the X factor underlying all of this is how well written his application is. Here, John spends too much real estate talking about his responsibilities. He shares things like a head scribe recruits and trains new scribes. That writing is not new to most admissions committee members and could have been replaced with real stories or real reflections about his time as the head scribe. The writing is often also too on the nose, and he shares statements that are not supported with more stories and more data. Like when he shares, "Furthermore, I learned to be culturally competent because we often worked with people from various cultural backgrounds such as Mongolia or Tibet." That writing leaves you open to more questions, like how do working with people from Mongolia or Tibet get you more comfortable with their cultures? What specifically were different about their health experiences than you would have expected for other patients from other backgrounds? So for his written application, we grade that at a 3.5 stars. So we've come to the end. Are they competitive? And we have 5 categories here. Did John matriculate to a high-tier California school like UCLA? Or did he matriculate to a middle to lower-tier California med school, UCI? Or did he matriculate to a high-tier out-of-state school like UChicago? Or a mid-lower tier school out of state like Virginia Commonwealth University? Or the worst outcome, did he get in nowhere? And remember, ultimately John wanted to be competitive for that first option, a high tier MD California school. And now for the final review. John interviews at Dartmouth, Georgetown, Keck, USC Keck, Loma Linda, UCLA, UCSF, and UC Irvine. At Dartmouth, at Georgetown, at Keck, he was accepted. At Loma Linda, he was accepted. At UCLA, also accepted. At UCSF, rejected. And at UC Irvine, he was accepted. John ultimately matriculated to UCLA, where he was my medical school classmate. If you like this video, you'll love the rest of our application dissection series here. See you soon.